From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay.
What we're saying is the farmer can now receive more money.
Cutting out the middleman when it comes to your cup of coffee, how this machine benefits farmers, why the U.S. apple industry is counting on the Chinese New Year, and the Vice President overseas talking trade.
The United States has had a trade imbalance with Japan for too long.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence now in Singapore, where he's attending summits on behalf of President Trump. Trade is a top issue. On Monday, the first leg of his tour, Pence met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The two discussed bilateral trade, Japan facing demands to reduce its trade surplus with the U.S.
The United States has had a trade imbalance with Japan for too long. And American products and services too often face barriers to compete fairly in Japanese markets. It's for that reason that we welcome the steps that have been taken to address these issues over the past 2 years, beginning with the U.S.-Japan economic dialogue. But the best opportunity for free, fair, and reciprocal trade will come in a bilateral trade agreement.
Those formal bilateral trade talks are expected to begin in January 2019. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer says this trip does start those talks off on the right foot.
And he also said that the resulting agreement with Japan, and I think there will be one, will serve as a template for further bilaterals. But these things take a while. I don't think we're going to get it anytime soon, but let's hope for the first 6 months of 2019 that we'll get a final, resolution.
Wiesmeyer says agriculture should be watching to see if the bilateral talks can improve upon what was agreed to in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Talks are still going on between the U.S. and China to end the trade war. The Wall Street Journal reporting Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin talked with his Chinese counterpart on Friday. Meanwhile, China's premier saying at an event in Singapore he's confident the two countries have the wisdom to be able to find a solution that is acceptable to both sides. President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping are scheduled to meet at the G20 summit in Argentina later this month. One company is making some inroads to China. Drovers reporting Brazilian meat packer JBS has signed a trade pact with Alibaba's Wind Chain. The deal will send approximately $1.5 billion in beef, pork, and poultry to China over the next 3 years. Alibaba has been described as the Amazon of China. It specializes in e-commerce, retail, and technology. The deal is scheduled to begin in 30 days. Discussions are underway again to try and get the farm bill settled. Conference talks started yesterday. There's still no major progress in finding an agreement. Outgoing House Ag Chairman Republican Mike Conaway and the current ranking member Democratic Representative Colin Peterson held the meeting for less than 30 minutes. Lingering issues remain, including the idea of expanding work requirements for food stamps. U.S. Department of Agriculture is still working through rates for the second round of the market facilitation program. That announcement expected to come after December 3rd. Previous reports show the rates will be similar to what producers received in the first round. However, USDA Undersecretary Bill Northey says those numbers aren't set in stone. He did confirm with AgDay the second round of payments will be for the remaining 50% of production.
Every intention right now is that the second tranche here is the last tranche. So the first set of payments was for the first half of the production. The second rate will be for the second half of the production. We're not looking to stretch this out into a quarter and a quarter. We intend to be able to have this concluded now. Producers would know what they need to be able to get from the rest of the market for the rest of the year. It needs to be straightforward and simple.
Northey says producers need to sign up by January, but those experiencing a late harvest have time. He says producers will have until May to provide production evidence to their local FSA office.
The I-80 Harvest Tour is brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
Politics, weather, and trade all impacting soybean prices this harvest. With bean prices in the single digits, our farmers hanging onto their soybeans or selling. As Betsy Gibbon explains in our final I-80 Harvest Tour of the season, it may depend on where you live.
The decision to hold soybeans is simple for some farmers.
I'm storing everything I can get in the bins.
Purdue University and the CME Group are seeing it too. Its Ag Economy Barometer Index measuring if farmers are holding on to their soybeans, asking farmers that exact question.
Approximately 1 out of 5 farmers in our surveys said that they anticipated storing more of their soybeans this year than they usually do. And nearly half of them said that they anticipated storing soybeans until the trade conflict is resolved.
There are many factors. Soybean basis in the western Corn Belt is poor and has been for weeks. That's because trains are only minimally moving beans out of West Coast ports.
We don't ship directly to them, but we have customers and competitors that do, and we've received feedback that they have no plans currently right now to ship, which typically is what they do during harvest.
Analysts say the situation won't change unless there's a resolution with China.
If we have bad trade negotiations, I don't see it changing because no farmer is going to sell it at $1.60 under anyway. We'll just stay here until we start to figure out what's going to happen next.
However, when it comes to holding soybeans, it may just depend where you live, especially in rural Corn Belt areas, driven with ethanol and livestock, and usually better basis.
I think a lot of guys store corn on the farm just for that reason, to sell to these local feeders and sell the beans. I mean, I think, at least for this guy, I need the money in the fall to pay bills.
Some merchandising managers in Iowa say farmers are selling soybeans off the combine or putting them on a contract.
It doesn't pay me anything to store it and wait because there's no carry in the market. You know, I'm not making anything down the road, you know, for 6-9 months that I used to.
Nolman says soybean yields are holding up in eastern Iowa despite weather issues. Yet she says damage is an issue at river terminals. Beans in the Delta are suffering and being docked too.
If they're coming from the north, that's going to be harder for the beans to be exported. So I will say the terminal schedules have been harder this year on discounts towards damaged beans specifically, and they're only letting in so many of a percentage too.
USDA releasing in its latest WASDE report, U.S. soybean stocks are piling up, now at 955 million bushels, up 70 million from last month.
This all, of course, relates back to the U.S.-China trade dispute. They cut the export projection by 160 million bushels. That's about 8% versus last month.
Well, I'm projecting right now that we'll pick up 300 million bushels out of non-Chinese buyers because of our discount. And I think if the trade talks go bad, we might be able to pick up another 120 million, but that's going to depend.
Biederman says China is the biggest factor, but the U.S. needs to continue to keep and make trade deals as American farmers push yields higher. Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Snow bringing a stop to harvest in some parts of the country, but the snow can be pretty awesome too, as meteorologist Cindy Clausen explains in today's Crop Comments. Cindy?
Thanks, Clinton. Well, sometimes we can forget how much fun you can have in the snow, even if it does come a little early. Check out these girls making snow angels in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Dave Deacon shared this photo with us. Now, he says this actually happened at his neighbor's house, and he says he's blessed to have neighbors who let his kids do this. Well, let's take a look at our wind speed forecast, and you can see that we're going to start off with some windy conditions, especially up in New England. Watch as we let it go during the day. We're going to see those winds picking up in parts of the northwest, especially over towards the western, northwestern parts of Montana. Still a pretty windy day, though, as you get up into Maine. We see those winds increase a little bit in the southeast as well. Overnight we go. You can see some of those winds shifting into the Great Lakes, still a bit on the breezy side in the southeastern United States. And through the day tomorrow, we're going to see those winds moving up into the mid-Atlantic states, still continuing in parts of the northwestern and into the northern plains. All right, we're going to have a lot more details on your national forecast coming up, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
When we come back, we'll look at the new dairy insurance options and how it may help producers facing low prices. And the trade war with China may have big impacts on apple growers. I'll explain. And tracking coffee from grove to grounds. It's It's been a tough year for dairy producers, which is why a good safety net has been an important part of the conversation in 2018. Tyne Morgan continues the discussion in today's analysis from the road.
Here now with Brian Rice of Rice Dairy. Brian, we know that there is a new insurance program for dairy producers, a lot like crop insurance, but looking at that program, do you see that as a good risk management tool for dairy producers moving forward?
It's a great risk management tool. Just like any tool, it's not a silver bullet. You got to understand how to have the different tools and how to use them, but this is an amazing new tool for dairy farmers to have in their toolbox.
Why do you think it's so beneficial for dairy farmers?
You know, there's the subsidy in there, which basically is put options at a discount because the government's helping out with that, but then there's also, you don't have to pay for that until after expiration, which is very different than the open market. So it works a lot, it's so flexible. You can design what you need kind of like you can on the exchange, but it's financially really compelling for the dairy farmer.
Looking at dairy farmers right now, we know there's been a lot of struggles when it comes to milk prices. What other risk management tools do you think are out there for dairy farmers right now when it comes to price?
You know, they've always got their co-ops that they can forward contract through. They've got the exchange. And really, again, Dairy RP is the most exciting thing for them that's available right now. In the new Farm Bill, may pass this year, we may get a redone version of MPP, which is good for a small amount of milk. And I think if that happens the way they want it to, that's going to be great as well, but again, limited volume. Really, Dairy RP is kind of the story of risk management for dairy farmers right now.
Can you compare it to anything else in the past? I mean, you said it's not a silver bullet, but could it revolutionize risk management for some of these dairy producers out there that are kind of grasping at every straw right now, considering how tough it is?
You know, the way we look at it, we talk to a dairy farmer and we assess their risk and we figure out what's the best tool at that moment for them. Dairy RP has slid to the top of the list, where basically when we're talking to a dairy farmer, it is either the first thing they've got to do or it's a part of the first strategy they have to do. So it's bumped its way up to the top of the pyramid in terms of importance.
And a lot more impactful than the margin protection program?
I think, yes, given the scale of it, because there is no volume restrictions. So for your larger dairy farmers, 1,000 cows and more, up to 10,000, no volume limits on DRP. MPP, you're kind of limited above a 500 cow dairy.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it, Brian Rice. Stay with us. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on Ag Day.
You could win a Ford F-150 Raptor in the Ag Explore Truck Sweepstakes. Enter at trucksweeps.com.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Your meteorologist Cindy Clausen as we look at the root zone moisture map, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. Still pretty dry out west, but the Midwest, lots of blue there.
Lots of blue, but what I have noticed in the last week is that we're starting to see some dry pockets filling back in parts of Missouri, Illinois. Just a few spots on the map right now, but it is a change over the last week, and the other change is in the Northwest where we are seeing it a little bit drier. Let's take a look at what's happening as far as the jet stream out there today, because that's been a big story. We have this cutoff low in parts of the south central United States. That's going to bring some not only wet weather, but some wintry weather in spots as you get down into the Tennessee Valley, eventually getting up towards the Ohio Valley. We've had cooler than normal air in place for a while in a lot of the country. Let's put this into motion. You can see that cutoff low will eventually join forces into a trough that's going to be sweeping through the northeast. We'll have another trough, a water trough, moving across the Great Lakes in the northeast as we get into early next week, with a bit of a ridge developing in parts of the west. Now at the surface, this is what that looks like. We're going to see this low pressure system moving up to the north, and watch as we see that rain, and then eventually we're going to be seeing some snow potential, especially as we get into parts of I think it goes a little further back than this. As we get into Arkansas, I think we're going to see some snow there, and into parts of Tennessee and Kentucky as well. There you can see it building, and especially into the overnight hours. So the northern fringe of this system is going to be a little bit on the wintry side. If you're closer to the coast, we're mainly just looking at it all rain. We do get a break from the precipitation, so we'll get some more harvest done. I've been seeing some combines rolling as I've been driving around in the country over the past couple of weeks. High pressure in the northeast brings at least a short quiet period. High pressure in the Rockies. We will have a couple of systems that move through parts of the northwest, and we'll see another one that moves down into the north central United States as we get into Thursday. But notice how this low pressure continues northward. We see a little bit more rain and snow into parts of Pennsylvania and now moving into parts of Indiana and Illinois. All right, here's a look at the snowfall estimate, and as we push into the next 24 hours, we don't see a lot. Most of what we see will be in the northwest, but we are going to keep an eye on what happens here in parts of the Missouri Boot Heel in areas nearby, as we do have a chance for some snow. Now, the precipitation overall especially is going to be in the southeastern United States with that low pressure system. That's going to be the real focus, and some wet weather right along the Pacific Northwest coast. Temperature wise, we're going to still remain on the cool side, very cool for so much of the country. 30s and 40s for a good chunk of the country, a little ridge of 50s and 60s up there. But then as we get into tonight, we'll see some 20s all the way down to Tulsa, even some 30s down into Dallas there. And then as we get into tomorrow, we start to warm it up a little bit more in parts of the plain states, but still some very cool 30s in the eastern part of the country. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the cities where you live. Cloudcroft, New Mexico, sunny and a bit warmer today with a high of 36 degrees. Truman, Arizona, mostly cloudy with some snow showers for you and a high of 36 degrees. And Parkville, Pennsylvania, mostly sunny, a little cooler with a high of 39.
Apple exports may hinge on the Chinese New Year. We'll tell you why and how the trade tariffs may impact this major market. And later, tracking coffee from brew to bean and beyond. How something called blockchain is helping consumers follow the trail grounds to grow.
AgDay, brought to you by Corvus Corn Herbicide from Bayer. Get an early season win against weeds with Corvus for end of season rewards.
An avocado grower strike continuing right now in the Mexican state of Michoacan. And the packer is reporting if it doesn't end soon, Mexican avocados could disappear from store shelves. Packing houses have been closed since the end of last month in Michoacan. A group of growers are demanding higher prices from packers. They've blocked roads to avocado ranches.
One of the importers said that day by day things look like they're going to resolve the issues, but it just hasn't happened.
Since the blockades went up, U.S. importers have taken steps to stretch supplies between what's in transit, in ripening facilities, and distribution centers across the U.S. Major importers have about a 2-week supply. Apple growers didn't escape trade retaliation from China. The industry waiting to see how big of a bite that's going to take out of Apple exports, which they say hinges on the Chinese New Year. Apple exports to China face a 50% tariff today. Those were put into place after the U.S. issued steel and aluminum tariffs. Jim Baer of the U.S. Apple Association says the industry was winning when it came to China. In 3 years, they went from buying 0 U.S. apples to becoming the 6th largest customer. It wasn't just volume. China was paying a premium for those exports. Baer says the industry should know how big of an impact the tariffs are having on U.S. apples within the next month before the Chinese New Year.
So, for example, if I came to visit you in your office in January in the Chinese New Year, and I would bring you the perfect U.S. red, delicious apple as a gesture of good health and friendship. And so if most of those exports to Asia happen for the Chinese New Year. If you miss that market, if you miss the Chinese New Year, then you're out for a whole year.
Baer says the association does expect the tariffs to hurt exports. He just doesn't know how much yet. Do you know where your food is coming from? New technology helping track everything, including coffee you drink. That story next in the country.
In the country, brought to you by Kubota's M7060, built to get the job done. See KubotaUSA.com or your local Kubota dealer for more information.
We all know there's nothing like fresh from the farm, and now coffee is getting in on the act. Check this out. Tech developers are trying out a new kind of coffee machine that pays bean farmers directly. The Berlin coffee machine roasts and grinds fresh coffee beans, then brews a fresh cup, and it only takes about 20 minutes. Using an app, people are able to select fresh beans directly from the farmer. Creators say it cuts out the middleman.
On average, there's around 16 people who touch the beans between farmer and consumer. And so that already makes for little to no visibility for the farmer to build their brand, but also in terms of reward financially, profiting from their own work and from the labor that's put into getting these beans to the market is small for them because it's being dissected between all these people. Because we can remove all these people from the supply chain, what we're saying is the farmer can now receive more money.
Consumers can communicate directly with the coffee machine, and that means you can message the machine and request a fresh cup of coffee every morning. There you go. Brave new world. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.